Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Monday the 16th of April, and before I introduce who's on the podcast this week, we had an interesting comment from Scott W75 on last week's podcast. He said, Steve's Forrest Gump impression, big smiley face, you should have to do accents in the movie quotes in the podcast going forward from now on. So quick debate on this one. Are we doing accents this week? Do we think it might give it away if we do the accents?
I don't sure I think of any specific accents for this film.
It also presupposes that we've seen the films in question.
That's an issue. Yeah, I mean, I have seen bits of this one, but yeah, I'm not. I don't think it'd be terrible. I think you might find that as an added bonus, we might do some where we can all agree that we could possibly muster an accent, although that's mainly just going to be hot fuzz.
Well, maybe we should go for acting excellence. Let's do that one. Right, so joining me on this edition are Steve Withers.
I got you a kitty.
Ed Selley.
I can't wait to show you my toys.
And Mark Botwright.
I'm beautiful.
Okay, so welcome back to the podcast. It's been an interesting week. It's been a week that's actually flown past, but we managed to get to the cinema. Both Steve and I managed to get to the cinema separately, of course, but we went to see the same film, which does help. So we'll be able to talk about that a bit later on. Noticed Ed's Twitter activity this week's been quite entertaining, especially the child seat Ed photograph. And I'm not going to say any more. People can go and search your Twitter feed, but is that a branded child seat? Is it a Recaro?
Hang on a second. We do have two Recaro child seats in the cars at the moment. I don't know if this one is. It might be a Corbeau.
That's just everything you need to know about Ed, right there. And the fact that he hasn't sold this one that's now too small because the cat likes to sleep on it.
Well, you know, if someone took your favourite spot away, you'd probably be quite grumpy.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to see how the cat reacts to that, actually, if you were to get rid of that. And
they hold grudges. You know, probably poo on something. But no, it's you know, it's one of those. I'm sure in the fullness of time we'll get shot of it. But the cat really likes it. So yeah, there's a car seat that does absolutely nothing other than serve as a cat bed. So yeah, you know, that seems pretty normal.
Okay. Anything else exciting in your life this week, Ed? Apart from you were going to bed 9 hours ago.
Yeah, but that was because I was just listening to music. I stress I wasn't listening to the music that I listed in the tweet after. I was simply reminding everyone of the sheer magnificence of Skatt Bros' Life at the Outpost. And if you've never seen the video for Skatt Bros' Life at the Outpost, I thoroughly recommend that you do.
It's an all-time classic, it absolutely is. For some reason it reminds me of Steve, I don't know why.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Good job. Right, so anyway, we've promoted your Twitter feed there, Ed. What have you been up to, Steve?
Quite busy, actually, annoyingly. Not busy doing what I suggested I was doing on.
Yes, I was trying to avoid that one. Yeah. Although you have been working from home since 2010, so I'm surprised that you've only just realised that you could do that.
Yeah, but it was always tricky before because I was always in danger you might ring me. Nothing could put you off more than that. I was in London early in the week and I've been doing some reviewing, and that's about it really. I'm going to the cinema, of course.
Yeah, cinema was not a good experience this week. I forgot it was Easter break, and of course, me and my wisdom, I thought, oh well, I've got things to do this afternoon. I'll go this morning for the first showing. It'll be empty. There'll be nobody in. Yeah. How wrong was I? Jesus.
No, all the parents will be out.
Oh, there wasn't any parents there. That was the problem. It was all blinking teenagers. It was a packed screen. All teenagers and wrestling apart, laughing and joking, and
people enjoying themselves.
Yeah, bastards. Yeah. When you get up to Mark,
not a great deal. I wanted to go and see Ghost Stories, but I quite shamefully, I want to find someone to go with me.
Somebody to hold your hand.
Yeah, preferably someone who I can blame any kind of childlike screams on.
What, you've got a Flanders scream, have you?
Yeah, I have a little bit like that, yes.
Okay, well, it looks like at least two of us got to the cinema, and you've attempted to go to the cinema, and I know Ed has no interest in the cinema at all whatsoever, so yeah, interesting.
I'm going to see, the Infinity Wars thing at some point this month, which I've suddenly remembered.
The Infinity Wars thing?
Yeah. But that was more my friend rang up. It's like someone we booked a ticket for can't go. Do you want to go? It's like, I suppose.
Oh, well, okay.
It wasn't a conscious decision on my part.
I suppose if you're not paying either, then all the better.
I have no idea if I'm paying or not. I'll pay. I'm not that impecunious, but certainly not now I've been paid. For the first time in 3.5 weeks, my business account doesn't look like I've been the victim of corporate fraud. So I'm in slightly better. Because obviously the LG OLED, I didn't realise that they just waltz in and take the money when they feel like it. It's like, oh, that was momentarily surprising. It's still not up on the wall, by the way. It came out of its box very briefly. We realised that the bracket will fit with different screws, but obviously still need to be relocated. So Tuesday is apparently when that's happening. So
which one did you get?
B7.
Ah, join the club.
At least the advantage there, Ed, is, and it's something that I'm coming to terms with again after 2 years of absence, is having to build the bloody stands and put them together and so on. I suppose if it's going on the wall, once you've got it up there, it's up there. Whereas our new reviewing system here at AVForums will involve 2 large TV stands where you can fit 2 TVs on each stand, so we can have 4 TVs running all at the same time. Guess who's got to build that and take it to bits?
Well, I'm sure that it must have seemed like a really good idea. You must have felt I'm being so proactive in the meeting. And then you're now staring at an enormous collection of scaffolding and thinking, oh, bollocks.
Well, it hasn't actually been delivered yet, but I'm now looking around here thinking, where the hell am I going to put this?
Well, yes. I mean, obviously, I was explaining before we started recording that, considering moving house. And I had a fascinating conversation with an estate agent lady. It's like, I need to take some of the details about what you need in a property. I went, oh, trust me, you don't. She goes, no, it's not how many bedrooms. Like, bedrooms are not the concern. Now, they proceeded to explain the requirements. It's like, oh yeah, I need the room has to be, the lounge ideally needs to be within a given ratio.
Yeah, has to be a rectangle.
I'm sorry, it needs to be a given ratio, and essentially, I need space to accommodate an equipment rack. She goes, what? Like an AV stand. I went, well, sort of. It's a bit bigger than that. And essentially, she just, I said, look. If you have something on your books that we think might work, it's like the A-Team. We'll call you, because it just don't.
And then she ran away.
Yeah, don't send me a list of stuff which just isn't going to work, because I'm going to put you in spam and not talk to you. And she's like, okay. So yeah, that's all fun.
Yeah, it is annoying when the number one thing is it has to be detached. That suddenly puts you in a different price bracket altogether.
It doesn't necessarily have to be. This is where it gets interesting, because obviously I've been working in a terrace, admittedly with some very patient and understanding people on either side of me for some considerable length of time. And some of the older houses around here, you could have a Grateful Dead concert in your lounge and they can't hear you next door, which is quite impressive. They really are very solidly constructed indeed. So not ruling things out. We're looking at 2 semis tomorrow, and then there's a detached on Monday. Living the dream.
Okay. Good stuff. And talking about living the dream, we have a shed load of competitions, and Mark's now going to do his impression of the guy at the end of every advert where he has to get the legal disclaimers out. So on you go, Mark. Right.
You can win a Yamaha Music Cast system that includes the YAS 306 soundbar, the WX010 wireless speaker, and WX AD10 wireless streamer, and that one runs till the 20th of April. You can also win a copy of Pitch Perfect 3 on Blu-ray, and that one runs till 24th of April. And a copy of Suicide Squad Hell to Pay on Blu-ray. That one runs till the 25th of April. And we've also got a Philips 55-inch 9002 or 9002 OLED TV. And that one closes on the 30th of April. And a little bit later, we've got an Arcam AVR 390 AV receiver, and that one runs till the 30th of May.
Good prizes, though. Good prizes there.
Yeah, and those of us not employed by the site can enter.
You can indeed. Just give the quick legal disclaimer, Mark.
All right. Yeah, all competitions open.
No, you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. Steve, you do it. Show them how it's done.
All competitions open to eligible members and can't do it. That's a real particular skill, isn't it? Saying
it is.
Legal disclaimers.
Just say it normally, and then speed it up ridiculously down to like 1 second in the edit.
Eligible AV4 members resident in the UK.
Yeah, that'll do. But yes, you're right. There's probably a skill set of voiceover artists that just say that is their one skill. I can read it really quick.
You accidentally
Right,
know, but
my
I
courier's just arrived. Hang on a second.
Yeah, this is going to happen quite a bit because I'm expecting a couple of couriers as well, or they may turn up early. No, I'm waiting on this scaffolding.
They're building it outside. Be some bloke standing at your window waving.
Is it actually scaffolding? Or
No, it's
some kind of tubular steel or something?
They're really nice stands. They look a bit like the old classroom style stands, if you know what I mean. So the TV's up high and you've got a little shelf down low.
The ones that you'd wheel in with the video.
Like those, but modern. So it's like one tube instead of like a square thing. It's like one tube, and you Visa mount the TV and then it fits on the tube and you tighten it up and you can move it up and down the pole. So we've got extra connectors so we can connect two TVs to the one pole, you see.
And then you can turn on some HDR content and have it sear your skin off.
Yeah, basically. It's like a cheap sunbed.
Nice.
Okay,
right.
There we go.
Okay,
My
sorry.
DPD courier has just arrived in a Passat, that most normal of delivery vans. Bizarre.
Yeah, I had that a couple of times this past week. It's supposed to be a certain company and it's been a removal firm that's turned up. They're obviously subcontracting it out to this removals firm. But I've got to say, far better than normal couriers. These removal guys, they actually don't smash things. Well, this one didn't.
Yeah.
Right, so that's competitions. Any previous competition winners, Mark?
None.
Okay, so that's everything wrapped up in the intro. We'll be back in a sec with hardware news. Okay, so hardware news. Let's start with some news before we go into review stuff. And finally, we're starting to get prices for the 2018 TVs coming through, and Sony have announced that their AF8 OLED TVs are open now for pre-ordering, will be released at the end of the month. And I have to say, Steve, the pricing is about £500 and 1 pence cheaper than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, it is. It says 2499 for 55-inch AF8 and 3299 for the 65-inch AF8, which I guess reflects the fact that this is designed to be a slightly lower tier TV compared to the A1, which remains their flagship OLED TV for this year. And I guess that's going to still remain priced a little bit higher. But that does set the bar, so okay, right, so AF8, that's 2499. What's its peer group? I guess the
Panasonic 802, which is the same price. No, it's 200 quid cheaper.
It's a little bit less, isn't it? 2399, I think.
Yeah, it's 200 quid cheaper. Yeah.
So that's a little bit cheaper. And then, from what I've read, although I don't know if it's been officially announced, LG's OLEDs are a little bit more. Or sorry, the C8, should I say, seems to be priced a little bit higher than that.
I think it's 2.7. But you get £300 cash back or something like that from certain retailers, but it still makes it quite expensive. That's if that's the correct price, because like you say, I don't think it's actually been officially announced yet. I think it's just retailers putting some prices up.
So, I think what that means though is that it's looking like that this year's models, this year's sort of mainstream mass market OLED models, as opposed to the sort of the higher end, more expensive models are going to be priced around about sort of $2.5 or less, $2.5 or less, which is, I think, quite good pricing, don't you? I mean, I think for a brand new 55-inch OLED TV, if we're paying between 2.3 and 2.6, I'd be pretty happy with that.
Yeah, it's like I say, they're about £500 cheaper than I thought they were going to. I thought they would be coming in 55-inch, just under £3,000 for all three of those brands. So it is nice to see them actually being quite a bit significant. Well, actually significantly lower than where I thought they were going to come in. So yeah, and it's not going to be long before they are sub £2,000 as well, I would imagine.
Oh yeah, I mean I'm sure we'll see a bit discounting as the World Cup approaches, and then after the World Cup, as we go into the autumn, I bet there'll be some big discounting then. So yeah, if you don't need a TV right now and you want to wait a few months, I'm sure you'll pick up. Well, I think Mark and I can vouch for the precipitous fall in pricing in the autumn on these TVs.
Don't.
Yeah, and
the 65-inch though as well. That's that's only £800 more. That looks to me even more of a bargain. Yeah,
and you think the difference between 55 and 65 is no great. Speaking as someone who's removed a 65-inch TV to put a 55 in its place, that's a huge difference in screen real estate when you actually have it next to each other. So there is
it's about 40% more, isn't it?
Yeah, you're right, Mark. It's It's quite noticeable. You always think, I remember comparing a 60-inch to a 65-inch TV, had them next to each other, and you think, oh, it's only 5 inches. It's still a considerable difference. So a 10-inch difference is enormous. Cute insert joke at your leisure.
Essentially, one, it would have been a bit tight on the odd budget thing, but 65 in this room would be ambitious, and it would actually start requiring me to start relocating wall-mounted speakers as well and things like that. So given I'm going from 42 to 55, I'm sure I'll be used to it in a week, but that's still a significant jump in itself.
That's a big jump, 13 additional inches off of 42. That's a massive increase in screen size.
Yeah, I drew the line at the point where I had to start thinking about, well, I could change this furniture.
A new house.
You start thinking, right, TV unit, if I kind of chop legs off and I put things that, when you get to that point, I think you just have to accept that, you've reached the limits of what you can accommodate in a room.
Yes. But it was raised in a podcast a couple of weeks back. I was pleasantly surprised in relative terms how small the B7 box is. But you do reach a point where there are going to be certain situations where a given size box, just because you can afford it, it might not physically get into the room that you want to put it in.
No, I had real trouble because I had to get mine up a set of stairs, which go around like a kind of dog leg at a couple of places, and it gets a little bit hairy.
Yeah. Well,
particularly with those boxes that you have to lift off as well, because it feels wrong. Everything on the top says, "Don't cut this open, don't cut it open," and yet you think, I don't like the way this goes.
Yeah.
The other thing, of course, all things are relative. I'll never forget when John Lewis delivered my Panasonic 32-inch PD30 CRT, and it was like a Cecil B. DeMille film.
Yeah, I'm just glad that I didn't review TVs back then. I'm glad that when I came in and started reviewing TVs, yes, you had the plasmas and they were bloody heavy things. That Pioneer Kuro, Jesus, the weight in that, having to lift that. But me and Steve are sitting here listening to you two rattling on there and thinking, well, you guys only have to do it the once. We have to do it week in, week out, don't we, Steve?
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? Repacking the TV is a significant challenge sometimes, because you take it out thinking like, okay, that goes down, that's fine. Then a week later or 2 weeks later, you're like, where's this bit go? How do I get the stand in?
Yeah. The other thing is, a lot of packaging is one shot. We've argued about this a lot, but yeah.
Well, the thing with me is it's really Krypton factor when you these new stands, or certainly some of the new stands are it's like a Krypton factor. And of course we're blokes, so we don't want to look at the instructions. If you look at the instructions, you have failed as a bloke. So you got to try and figure it out on your own. And there's some of them, Steve, isn't there? You could run the Krypton factor on some of these.
I think it was maybe a Panasonic TV last year where it took me, I think, close on an hour to get the sodding thing up, just because it was not intuitive at all. and eventually I thought I'd better look at the manual, and that didn't help. It didn't help either. What were we talking about? Oh yeah,
the AF8.
So TV pricing.
Can I just ask what? No, I was just going to ask about the AF8. Have they detailed how it is different to the A1?
It isn't. It's
other than just the stand?
It's just the stand, yeah. Obviously, you get the monolith design with the A1, which is beautiful. It is as a piece of industrial design. I don't like the fact, from a TV purist point of view, I don't like the fact it leans back slightly. But from a design point of view, because it hasn't got any speakers or anything either, it is really a beautiful looking thing, and the way that the back of the stand works as well with the subwoofer built in terms of design, it's a cracker. It's still a cracker. When we saw it at CES, not this year but the year before, I think all three of us were like, wow, that's something different. And it really is. The AF8, it's got a traditional stand on it, Mark. But saying that, it's nice. It hasn't got a huge footprint, has it, Steve? So
no, it's also not on an incline either, which I like.
It's not. Yeah.
In fact, I prefer the AF8 to the A1 personally, just in terms of overall design and the way that it sits on the stand. It will be I've got to say, as gorgeous as the A1 is to look at, it's a bugger to set up and move around.
Yeah.
And this looks a lot easier. Yeah. Otherwise, though, apart from the stand and the fact that it has two smaller subwoofers rather than one big subwoofer built into the back of it, because it hasn't got the angled easel stand bit that the A1's got, which is where they put the sub on that. Other than that, it's identical. Yeah. So it really is the same TV. Obviously, it's not going to ship with Dolby Vision.
No, that's the annoying thing. I mean, I've got the XF90 here at the minute, and it hasn't got Dolby Vision on it. I've been checking the firmware; it hasn't got any updates yet. They have released the firmware, Dolby Vision firmware, for last year's models, so it's really annoying at the minute. I've got it in for review, but I can't put the firmware on there, and I can't check if Dolby Vision's working because it isn't released yet. So, and I don't know why it's not released yet for that TV. It's quite annoying.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? You think about it, it's presumably the same update as the other models. It's the same processor. It's the X1 Extreme, isn't it?
Well, you would think that, but obviously I've been through the page, I've looked at the update, and it has all the model numbers there, and it doesn't mention the XF90. And
they did say at CES, didn't they? It was going to be later. It was suspicious.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shame though, because we've got that TV in there and I'm not going to be able to test it properly, which, and I hate putting things like it'll get a firmware update in the future, because that could be a year from now, knowing what has happened previously. So it's one of these things we just can't test. So you did mention that it might be an idea holding off buying TVs if you don't have to buy a TV at the minute. What we're planning to do this year is we will have 3 or maybe even 4 TVs on long-term testing this year. It's something that we think we really need to do. Just because of the number of questions that come up on the forums, the number of issues that get raised from certain people, the fact that we like to try and compare the TVs this year. So keep an eye on the forums. It's something that we're planning on doing. It's why there's scaffoldings getting delivered. This week we're going to be testing out. We're going to see if we can put these TVs on long-term testing and see what we can come up with in terms of content that you guys want out there, the questions you want answered, what it is that you're looking for. I've even got an Xbox One X coming today with 3 games.
3 whole games?
3 games, and I'm not a gamer, but it's where the TVs are moving to, so I'm going to have to become a gamer. But 4K HDR gaming is going to become a big thing, and the thing with it, Steve, is that a lot of the games are being mastered at 10,000 nits, which if the manufacturers haven't put correct tone mapping in to deal with that, like we saw with LG last year, it can cause some issues when it comes to gaming in HDR.
Some films too. I noticed that Blade Runner 2046 was mastered at 10,000 nits. Yeah. So it's becoming a bit of well, not an issue, but certainly a challenge for tone mapping when you're talking about something with that kind of peak dynamic range. Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how the manufacturers handle that, especially the game modes and so on. So, yep, that's all coming up TV-wise, and prices are coming out, so that's really, really interesting now. We're getting there. It's going to be like buses this year, Steve. I mean, we're being drip-fed them at the minute. I imagine we're going to get a whole load of them in the next 2 weeks or so.
Well, let's put it this way. We're in the middle of April. World Cup starts at the beginning of June. There's a 6-week window here.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I just quickly ask a question?
No?
Yeah.
All right, fair enough. Talking about gaming, I was just reading the report on the site about the AF8, and it says it can be used as a gaming device. Was there anything further on that? Or should I be asking Hodge?
No, because obviously I read the same PR, and I don't know what that means.
I didn't know if it was to do with Sony's PlayStation Now subscription service, because they had that on multiple devices when it rolled out, and there was kind of a somewhat muted response to it because of their pricing. And since then, they've kind of rolled it back to just PlayStation 4 and PC. So I think they've even stopped it on. I think they had it on some Blu-ray players at some point. But at one point it was on Samsung TVs. But I wonder if now it's going to be something they put in, solely for flagship or their kind of OLED range.
I'm not sure on that one, Mark, unless Steve knows something.
Not really.
No, so it's something we'll just have to wait and see. But the AF8 should be one of the TVs that we have on long-term testing, so that's certainly something that we can have a look at once we've got them in, and we can actually sit and play with them for a few weeks, or a few months rather, than just having the TVs for a couple of weeks. Because again, Steve, that's another issue that you can review the majority of things with the TV within a couple of weeks, but actually long-term testing has a lot more benefits, doesn't it?
Yeah, living with the TV is always a very different experience from just reviewing it for a week or two.
And to be fair, that applies to almost anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting that there's certain items that actually not for you guys. It's some of the more specialist hi-fi items. It's like, I wonder if this is going to be doing the things that it's doing now as slickly and effectively in a year's time, because you can't mark it on a hunch. But there are certain times when I'd be fascinated to know how well something would hang together after being used under, I suppose it counts as reasonably intensive use, but it's always a slight concern. I mean, equally, that Yamaha that I've just parted with, I mean, it's not a joke to say that when he was small, my son must have pushed the source direct button on that about 2,000 times, and it still functioned exactly the same as the day it was put in, which is a pretty impressive demonstration of what they do.
Yeah, I mean, there are obviously points that you can use as controls when it comes to your assessment. So, Steve has a B7 there. That's his control. That's his reference point. We're going to have 3 TVs here on rotation, along with hopefully a QLED as well. And then anything that comes in for review that's the same size as those, it'll get compared to those within a few weeks. But you should have built up enough of a control with the other screens, and like I say, with Steve's got his reference point, he'll be able to build up a knowledge base there on that, and then be able to apply that to the TVs that come through. And I think that's probably the best way to assess it overall. Because like we say, for the majority of the time, we can't actually live with these TVs all the time. But if you have got decent control points, and obviously the experience that we have, and of course Steve calibrates a lot of things in the field as well, so he's able to check that stuff that comes in for review is also the same as a lot of the stuff that gets sold in retail outlets as well. So we have got a lot of control points there where we can look at, is this model performing the way it should be? And then, of course, the owners' threads on the forums are absolutely valuable to everybody, because these are the enthusiasts that are living with the TVs day in, day out, and finding the little niggles and finding little things and finding the good things as well. So, in terms of a resource, I don't think there's anything better out there and blowing our own trumpet than the forums and the way that things are put together, and a source of information. It should be invaluable to people looking for TVs. Was that too much of a sales pitch?
Very well done.
Yeah, and the guys who do the podcast are bloody handsome too.
Yeah, definitely got faces for radio. Right, that's the OLED news. Right, so we've got some stuff to go through review-wise. So who are we going to go with first? Let's go with Ed, because we've heard a bit of Steve now, and Ed's not said much. So, Ed, you got some what you described as absolutely fantastic speakers in.
Yes, and it was a speaker that came in. It's from Dynaudio, who are Danish and pretty large by all accounts, but I don't think we've actually reviewed. I've certainly not reviewed a Dynaudio product for AVForums before. And this is called the Special 40, and it's called the Special 40 because it celebrates Dynaudio's 40th anniversary. They're nothing if not logical. And it's a two-way stand-mount loudspeaker. And on the face of it, there's nothing particularly remarkable about the materials that go into it, how it's bolted together, or anything like that. And when they arrived, they were delivered by Dynaudio representative, and they'd been in the boot of her car overnight. And it had been properly cold at that point, if you recall, talking a couple of weeks back. And when they came out of the box and were placed on stands, they were sufficiently cold that they had condensation forming on the cabinets. And we plugged them in, we confirmed that they ran, all very well and good, had a cup of coffee, thank you very much. And I thought very little of it, and I just sort of let them come round to room temperature and then started listening, for the purposes of getting the notes together. And I sat there listening for 4 hours, first time out. And the thing is, I spent 2 weeks trying to find something I didn't like about these loudspeakers, and I couldn't. They are, in terms of what they do and how they do it, they are just ridiculous. They have been awarded a 10 out of 10 because, short of a slightly subjective comment from a couple of people that saw their finish, the actual wood finish, which I think is fantastic, they are pretty much without vice. I mean, obviously, I can't point to a test pattern in the same way that the TV review guys can and things like that, but equally was checking their room response. First of all, their room response with speaker manufacturers, the standard measurement for frequency response is you quote the figure at plus or minus 3 dB for high and low frequency response. Now, Dynaudio quote, I think 41 hertz plus minus 3 dB in a sort of anechoic chamber. In this room, I got up, we didn't dip below minus 3 dB from a flat response until 29 hertz from a stand mount, which is ridiculous.
What's the sensitivity on that, Ed?
86.
Okay, so they're quite a difficult speaker to drive then.
They're not. Well, yeah, except that the Dynaudio are incredibly conservative about their sensitivity measurements. I would not describe them as significantly harder to drive than something like the Bose & Wilkins 705 that I reviewed recently. Then you could use the same amp on both speakers. And make no mistake, the Dynaudio is £500 more than the Bose & Wilkins. But if you happen to have that not inconsequential sum available, the B&W is a fine speaker. The Dynaudio is a truly sensational one. Yesterday, actually, they left yesterday afternoon. Yesterday morning, I have another product which is going through the review process. It's another one of the all-in-one systems that we're looking at over the course of this year, and that's £3,500. And I paired it up with the Special 40s as a sort of parting shot. So don't get me wrong, as a combination, £6,000. Now that's huge. It's a staggering sum of money, but I honestly could not envisage a better way in terms of providing sound for music and supporting connection from a television. There's no other way I would have spent £6,000. Just so good, so very, very good. So yes, I promise you, I've been slightly less confused and rambling in the review itself, so please feel free to have a look through that. But yeah, it hasn't. This will undoubtedly be asked in the comments. It's got a 10 out of 10. It doesn't have a reference badge. Because we have awarded a reference badge to the Q Acoustics Concept 500, which is both subjectively and objectively one of the most staggeringly capable loudspeakers you can buy under £10,000. The Dynaudio isn't rewriting the rules or setting a benchmark in quite the same way. There are other ways of spending £2,500 which you subjectively might prefer, but nonetheless, at the moment, as it stands, I haven't found a better £2,500 loudspeaker, and I have looked at quite a few of them. And it is absolutely sensational.
I take it that these are designed stereo pair bookshelves, so they're not really designed for home cinema use.
Well, yeah, there's no matching centre for the specials that they did. Dynaudio also made a special 25 for, imaginatively enough, their 25th anniversary. They only come out as stereo speakers. I mean, obviously, there are plenty of other Dynaudio speakers which have full AV capabilities, and most of them are extremely good. This is just a stereo pair of loudspeakers. But equally, as I say, the product that's being tested at the moment has got an HDMI input to take ARC from a telly, as well as the other 8 million things it does, all of them pretty well. So I have to be honest. We've had this conversation before. If I was having to pare down equipment, I would lose the ability for multi-channel way ahead of I'd lose decent stereo, and the results were absolutely superb. So yeah, I mean, please feel free to have a look at the review. If you've got any questions, ask them. But I have to say, I was blown away by them. Okay, good stuff. And it just so happens that Steve's also been looking at some speakers that are really quite popular on the forums at Arendal. Now, the 1723s, you looked at these originally, was it 2 years ago, Steve?
A year ago.
So they were quite a big speaker, but a well-performing speaker. These are supposedly the smaller version of them.
Yeah, this is the 1723S. S presumably stands for small. And yes, they are smaller than the 1723s. However, I would never consider these to be small speakers in any other circumstances. They still remain relatively large speakers. Otherwise, though, despite the slightly smaller dimensions, their performance is almost identical to the 723. The 723 has a larger driver. It's got 8-inch rather than 6.5-inch. But they use the same tweeter, the same design, layout. They look basically identical, apart from one's just slightly smaller than the other. And performance-wise, as I say, that they're almost identical, and they are superb speakers. I mean, like you say, Arendal, I think, has been very popular on the forums, very popular with speaker fans, very popular in terms of their design and performance. And I think it's because Arendal aren't trying to redesign the wheel. They're not trying to do anything revolutionary. They're trying to make speakers that are well designed and beautifully made. And these speakers are gorgeous in terms of their design and build quality. I mean, incredibly inert cabinets. They weigh a ton. Even these small speakers. I mean, I'll give you an idea, because they're called the monitor, which or monitor S, should I say, which is the bookshelf, and I use that term loosely, bookshelf speakers. There's also a floor stander called the Tower S, and then there's also a center speaker, center S, and there's also the surround S, which is a tripole speaker that you can use for surrounds. And the monitor S is 18.7 kilos and 569 by 245 by 320 millimeters. So you get an idea that although this is smaller than the previous generation, it is still quite a large speaker. But then again, if you want to move air, you're going to need a decent sized cabinet, and it does it really well. They're beautiful performance. They're really well balanced. So if you're using them in a 5.1 system, which is what I was doing along with their subwoofer one, so they've got a range of subwoofers as well. 1.5, 2, and 3. I think maybe they did a 1 and a 2 and thought we need something in between, and ended up with a 1.5. I'm not sure they really thought through that bit. But yes, as a system, it works beautifully. Really lovely tonal balance, great steering of effects around the room. It's just seamless, and lovely clarity and detail to these speakers. And they really are cracking set speakers. Now, interestingly, since I reviewed the original 1723s a year ago, they're now THX certified. They've obviously been through the THX certification process in the meantime. So both the original 1723s are THX certified now, and so are the 1723Ss.
Ultra 2.
Yes, Ultra 2. So they've had to undergo, I think it was something like 400 or 500 different tests to get certified. But I mean, given the performance of the 723s a year ago, I'm not surprised that they passed certification, because you could see that they were clearly designed to deliver a stunning home cinema experience, and they do. Yeah, I'm really impressed with them. So if you've got the budget, and they're not wildly expensive, but one thing I should point out is you have to buy them from Norway. So they are only priced in euros. Some people were saying, well, what's the price? It's difficult to say, really, because they are only priced in euros. And you can buy them, and I could give you a price right this minute based upon an exchange rate that I could get off of the internet or something like that. But that's not necessarily what you actually pay, because obviously exchange rates change on a day-to-day basis, and different card manufacturers will.
If you're paying on a credit card as well, there's usually a 2.5% charge. There'll be usually a charge. Plus, credit card manufacturers, they'll have credit card companies will have their own. Their exchange rates will vary, and they certainly won't be a bid offer spread you'll see on the internet. So it's difficult to say exactly how much you'll pay. You can get a ballpark figure, but I think even considering the pricing in euro terms, the monitors, there's two different prices as well, which makes it a bit even harder, because there's a matte finish and a gloss finish. So if you go for the matte black or white or gloss black or white, the matte finish is 1,599 euros for a pair, and the gloss finish is 1,699 euros for a pair. Now, for what you're getting, that is actually really good value, I have to say. And in fact, overall, although they're not necessarily cheap by comparison to some speakers, I think they're a best buy, absolutely, for performance, build quality, and value overall in terms of pricing. The center speaker you can pick up for 799 euros or 849, depending on which gloss, which finish you go for, and the surrounds are 1299 or 1399 for a pair. And the subwoofer one, split subwoofer, that's 899 or 949. So I think that's pretty good pricing for what you're getting.
You're falling into reviewer issues now, where you lose all sight of value. I'm gearing up for Munich 2018, which is the worst for it. I'll never forget 2 years ago when I'd spent a day wandering around, and the representative from Audio Technica was showing me their headphone amp, and it's 6,000 euros. Oh, that's pretty competitive then, and I genuinely meant it. I'd lost all sight of logic, reason, and value. I was lost, but there you go.
Okay, so that's the Arendals. Like we said, the review's up on the website. Go and have a look at the review. Cracking set of speakers there, Best Buy as well. So I guess there is a little bit of inconvenience that they're in euros and you have to get them delivered. But then I'm guessing that they'll have a return policy as well, where you can get your money back if you're not happy, that kind of thing, Steve. Yeah,
from what I've read, their service is excellent, I have to say. And they do provide some nice little features. When you buy a set of stuff, whatever you buy, speakers or a whole package, they include a really nice hardback book all about Arendal, the speakers, but also some really useful information about correct setup, and some tips about subwoofer placement in particular, which is really handy. Also, they include little white gloves with the speakers. Again, something that's actually quite useful, particularly if you've got the gloss version and you want to keep fingerprints off them.
Yeah.
And they also include some toffees, which was very nice of them as well.
All right.
White gloves and toffees.
Okay. Interesting.
These are the small things that please me.
Well,
there's some sweets in this
sounds
box.
like some kind of Michael Jackson Halloween setup to lure kids.
Allegedly.
You said, yeah, I'm trying to move away from that very, very swiftly. You said that it's the small things in life that keep you happy, Steve, but I understand that the SVS PB-4000 was anything but.
Yeah, no, I have to start by saying that it's my own fault because I had seen it, but I'd seen it in a dark and very crowded hotel room, so it wasn't. Its girth wasn't quite as apparent at that point. And also, I thought Ed was reviewing the same subwoofer. So when he was talking about its size and weight and things, I was thinking, it sounds quite big, but yeah, okay. But he wasn't. He was doing the SVS PB-4000, which is the smallest sealed unit, and I got the.
Can we be clear on this? Small is relative.
Yeah, well, it's relative. It's relative, but compared to what turned up at my front door, it was small. I got the PB-4000, the ported version. It's the size of a chest freezer. A small compact car. It's 70 kilos and absolutely enormous. And I was taken aback slightly because my initial thought was, okay, I've got the box into the house, but can I get the subwoofer out of the box and into the home cinema? Now, I think as Ed had previously mentioned, they have at least designed a very useful and effective way of getting the sub out of the box. Which works because you basically kind of slide the whole thing out and then you remove it from the packaging. But then we had to move it, and of course it was it's got sort of curved edges and it's glossy and really slippery, and you're trying to hold this thing. There's two of us and it's 70 kilos. It was quite a challenge to get it into the home cinema, and once it was in there, it wasn't going anywhere. But I will say, once you've got past the size issue, and it is something you need to bear in mind because it looked comical. If you put it at the front of the room first, and it just looked comical because it's poking so far out from the wall. So you need to bear that in mind if you're going to get these in. Do think of the logistics of actually physically getting them in the room, and also think about where you're going to put them in the room. But performance-wise, absolutely stellar. I think I was thinking of a quote. I can't remember who it says, but he was a US president. But he said about you should talk softly and carry a big stick. And this is a classic example of a sub that can deliver subterranean bass when it needs to, but also is surprisingly agile and subtle in its performance at times, which you would not think of something this big. But it was a really, SVS now to make a subwoofer, don't they, Ed? And yes. And this sub really it can go deep, but it does it in a controlled manner, so it never feels. It always feels organic and part of the soundtrack, and never overpowering in an unpleasant way. I
have owned SVS in the past, and I had one of the cylinder subwoofers, the original cylinder subwoofers, and they have a really well thought of way of doing things. Lots of power there, but it's the headroom that you're getting.
Yeah, exactly. It's the headroom that really so if you need that extra headroom, it's there, but you don't always need it, but it's there, and it delivers it in this really controlled and precise fashion, which I think is fantastic. This is this basically sits, so it's replacing, I think, the 13 Ultra series. They filtered down some of the stuff that features that had added to the 16 Ultra series, which we reviewed last year. So you've got things like there's a display on the front. So actually, you look at the back of the sub, it's quite unusual because you think, where are all the controls? It's just got the balanced XLR and RCA line inputs and a power cable and an on-off button. That's also on the back. You control it from either the display at the front or using the provided remote, or there is also a remote app, which is very effective because you can basically sit in the sweet spot and then you can control and calibrate and set up the sub from that point, which I think makes perfect sense. The display can be turned off, I should also stress, because it would be really annoying if you had this blue display on the front. But I think yeah, for terms of again, it's not cheap. £2,249, I believe, for the PB. I think it's slightly less for the SB and slightly less again for the cylinder. There is a cylinder one as well, Phil, which I think would be really interesting because if you're talking about space issues, that might be the option people would go for. But again, it's I think for what you're getting, it's good value. When you see the thing, and you just tap on the cabinet, so well built and inert. And like I said, did I mention it last week, or maybe I didn't make the edit? But I actually at one point had to stand on it in socks, I should point out, not in shoes. But it could easily take my weight. It's so well built.
Chris, you could have slid off there and broken your back or anything. Did you not think health and safety, Steve?
It was glossy, so it was a bit slippery.
That would make one hell of a "have you had an accident at work?"
It was how we would want it to go. Yeah. So price and performance wise, it's absolutely stonking sub. And the only thing I will stress, and maybe if you're thinking about this range, you might want to consider the slightly smaller and slightly lighter SB, or even the cylindrical one. I think it's.
And Ed, you looked at the SB, but you didn't look at it for AVForums. You looked at it for somebody else. But would you back up what Steve said there?
Yes, I would. The only thing I would say about the SB, and I've had exactly the same experience with the SB13, which I did review for you guys a long time ago. There were times, and this is a ridiculous thing to say about a subwoofer this size, there were times when I thought it was a bit civilized. And it's all a bit, it's beautifully controlled, balanced and damped and all the rest of it. But there were points where really, in that SVS app, they should take a leaf out of Tesla's book and just have an idiot button where it turns off all of the control and basically it will just produce a giant trouser flapping noise. Because one of the subs I did review for you guys, the Golden Ear super sub thing.
Yeah.
I mean that in so many ways is nowhere near as accomplished as what SVS has achieved. But there were points where it was just hilariously good fun.
Yeah.
And it would be perfectly possible for SVS to go, right, okay, twat mode, and just select it from there. And just being able to do that every now and again would be the icing on the cake for me.
But you see, for me, a subwoofer, it's there to complement. So it's there to make your speakers into actual full range speakers. So it should have that performance.
It does that absolutely.
But people on the forums and that I've read and so on, and there's nothing wrong with this. People like to run their subs a little bit hotter for movies. They want a bit more air moving and that kind of thing. At the expense probably of the subtlety and of the musicality of what these subwoofers are capable of. And there's nothing wrong with that. So a ludicrous mode on a subwoofer, Ed, I think you better patent that now, because that's a great idea. So that's it. Maybe Steve will look at the cylinder. Steve, maybe at some point?
Yeah, I think I might at some point. I'd be quite interested to see how that performs. And like I say, from a space perspective, it might be the ideal solution for many people, because I think most people would struggle to get this, even the SB, but certainly the PB. Yeah, you need a dedicated room for this, and even then, I've got a dedicated room, and even then, it looked ridiculous in mine.
You've got to be careful. You've got to be careful with the cylinders.
Please bear that in mind.
You've got to be careful with the cylinders because they're carpeted. If your experience of this is anything like mine, the cat will think that's the best scratching post I have
cat's
ever
not allowed
seen
in the home cinema at all,
Good.
under any circumstances. I'll tell you what, though, Phil, because I had a point of reference because I put on Jumanji, and obviously we saw that in the Dolby Cinema.
Yeah.
And the drumming that when it announces something bad's about to happen in the film, the SVS handled that extremely well.
Good, because I think that Dolby Theatre was kind of reference quality when it came to
that was
how bass should
feel
be.
That bass in your chest.
You could. It's phenomenal. Right, I think that's it for hardware. So we'll be back in a sec with movie news and reviews. Okay, so movie news and reviews, and we've actually been to the cinema, as we discussed at the beginning of the podcast. It's not great going during Easter if you're like me or like Stephen, you're used to going in and being the only person in the cinema, which is great sometimes, because that's why I enjoy going during the week, Steve. Certainly earlier screenings, if I can make it to an earlier screening, because you more or less get the cinema to yourselves nowadays. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it was a packed screening that I saw, and I guess the film that we're about to review, Rampage with The Rock, it's one of those big dumb B movies that you have to see with an audience, I think. Or certainly it elevates the feeling when you're watching it, when people are laughing at the right bits, the jokes are landing, the emotion, and there is emotion in it, which I was quite surprised at for a Rock movie. I think that all helps when you got a full cinema. So I've gone first the last couple of times, so I'm going to let you go first on this one and give us your thoughts. This is probably going to be a bit biased, people, because Steve does like The Rock.
I do. And the reason I like The Rock is because he is a surprisingly talented actor, which he proved to a certain degree in Jumanji, and extremely charismatic. And you know what? He makes fun films. Fun, competently made, well-written movies. I mean, the majority of The Rock films that I've seen, certainly in the last few years, have been great fun. And this is no exception. It's made by the same director that directed San Andreas, and it's exactly the same kind of thing. San Andreas was a disaster movie. and it was, ticked all the cliche boxes, and it was just big, dumb fun and absolutely ludicrous, but you thoroughly enjoyed it. And the Rampage is a monster movie, and it ticks all the cliche boxes.
One of the things I found, Steve, I don't know if you found it as well, there's a real hark back to traditional Japanese monster movies here, like the original sort of Godzillas, or even some of the Korean stuff. I don't know if you ever saw some of the Korean monster stuff. Yeah, it had that kind of vibe to it, but in a more sort of playful B-movie type.
Yeah, it wore its influences quite proudly on its sleeve. Obviously, it is based upon a video game from the 80s, an arcade game. And it involves The Rock, a giant gorilla, and a giant wolf, and a giant alligator, basically. Exactly. Who doesn't want to see that? And yeah, it does exactly what it says on the tin in terms of delivering big, dumb fun. And it's as dumb as a box of frogs at times. I mean, there's some stuff that you think, really?
Absolutely, yeah.
But you got to go with it because, it's got its tongue in its cheek a little bit. And but a surprising amount of emotion, too. You didn't think you'd be getting teary-eyed about a giant ape, but you will. And some good jokes. Some jokes didn't always land for me, but and unfortunately, the set screening I was in was quite empty, so it didn't have the kind of audience reaction factor I think it could have done with for a film of this nature. But the effects were good. The Rock was great. The supporting cast were fairly good, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
It was basically a box of cliches, though, wasn't it? Really, Steve. Everything that you imagine in one of these movies, from the military to the government agencies to the leading actor to the special ops team and all the rest of it. I mean, every cliche of an action big dumb movie is in there, but it's done in a fashion that's really tongue in cheek, and it's almost knowing in the way that it does it as well, which it's almost like a wink to the camera.
No, it's very knowing. Yeah. Like the whole introduction of the Special Forces team was classic Michael Bay intro to
absolutely.
But done in a jokey. They did it deliberately that way because then they could then subvert your expectations later in the film.
Yeah,
that was quite clever. I mean, it's actually although the film is dumb, the filmmaking is clever. And I think that's the difference. You can if you make a dumb film in a clever fashion, that's not the same as just making a stupid film. This is dumb and fun, but done in a clever way. And in that sense, it absolutely delivers. So I mean, I was extremely pleased to spend and also it hit my criteria these days. Hour and 47 minutes, spot on. Don't overstay your welcome.
It absolutely didn't overstay its welcome. It was nice and lean in that respect. It kept moving, which is what you want from a movie like this. You don't want a lot of dialogue scenes, and basically the dialogue is pretty shocking in places. But again, with a wink to the camera, I think, and definitely the bad guys. When we're talking about cliches, absolutely. And there's some points in the plot, and you think, what the? But you just go with it. You go with it because it's fun. It's not trying to be serious. It's not trying to prove any points. It's not trying to give you or teach you moral lessons or anything like that, which we'll come on to in a second. Big dumb fun. I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10.
7 out of 10 seems fair for me. I was slightly concerned at the end of the sheer level of collateral damage that was involved in the film.
Yeah, but it was
hundreds of thousands of people dead.
Yeah, but it was only Chicago, and Chicago hasn't had much.
It got twatted, didn't it? Get twatted in the Transformers at one point. I think it was
maybe.
But yeah, there was some fairly substantial damage done to Chicago, and you're thinking, where are all the people?
Yeah, absolutely. But
it's either very early on Sunday morning or
yeah.
Yeah,
I
loved it.
One thing that did surprise me, I don't know, maybe I'm just old and not with it anymore, but it was a 12A certificate. There was a lot of young kids in this screening, and I did think it was maybe a little bit gory.
There was a scene definitely with the Special Forces team that was, I thought, quite. They kind of did it very quickly, and it was also suggested, and some of it was out of focus or in the distance. But even so, it still felt quite graphic. But I mean, it's a 12A, isn't it? So the idea is, if your kid's less than 12, it's up to the parent to decide whether they're old enough to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not I'm not saying people shouldn't take their kids along. That's your choice, your kids. Blah blah blah. It's just for me, I felt, given the certificate, I was quite surprised with the level of gore. And that scene that you're talking about as well, it's quite intense as well, that scene. So That's the only thing I thought. Go on, Mark.
Towards the end of half term, I don't think parents really care.
Just get the kids out of the house.
Yeah. Okay. So if you're up for some fun on the big screen, recommended. Go and see Rampage. It's really good. Although if you haven't seen Ready Player One yet, that would go and see that, because that's an absolutely cracking movie, and I'm going to go and see that again when the kids go back to school next week. I'm going to go and get. Unfortunately, no longer on the IMAX screen, which is a shame, because I wanted to see it in IMAX 3D. But I'm going to go and see it again while it's on the big screen, because I think it's one of those event movies. Now, I was mentioning morals and all the rest of it, and how you get no hit over the head of it. Star Wars: The Last Jedi turned up in the post.
You accidentally ordered it, didn't you?
On 4K Blu-ray, and I'm thinking, who the hell's this come from? And I looked back at my order history on Amazon, and I'd ordered it when it became available before I'd seen the film.
Yeah, in a moment of madness.
Yeah.
Or at least blind hope.
And I'd forgotten all about it, so I now have the disc. So I sat and watched it again last night. Second time around, the stuff that grated on me in my initial viewing still grates on me now. Interestingly, in the extras, when Hamill's making his points, I agree with him totally, although he was kind of had to go with it, basically, if he wanted to be in the film.
Have to check and shut up, Mark.
Yeah, basically, that's what he was told. The thing that really stood out the second time of viewing was the whole morality thing that's in there. There was the way they treat Chewie and so on. So I've watched that a second time. People kept saying to me, see it a second time, you might change your mind. If anything, it's just reinforced what I thought initially. The extras were really well produced.
They're very, very good, actually, I have to say.
Yeah.
And I do think that listening to Rian Johnson's, which was obviously recorded, his commentary in particular, and the documentary were all done before the film had been released. So he's talking about it without any, context of what other people thought of it. But his rationale for doing certain things, I think, I understand where he's going there. He didn't want to just do the same thing again. He wanted to do something a little bit different. So things like Luke's behavior, he thought, let's not just do this. Let's not just redo Empire and Yoda teaching Luke. Let's do something different. So fair enough. And the thing about Rey's parentage, again, his rationale, actually, I thought, okay, I kind of, that makes sense. His reason for doing it makes sense. It doesn't actually explain why it's treated such a big secret and a big deal in The Force Awakens. And ultimately, I came to the same conclusion I had before, which is it just feels like a whole separate film. It doesn't feel like a sequel to The Force Awakens. It feels like its own film and not the second part of a trilogy. And I still think the plot's weak. I still don't think it's absolutely good plot.
There's a whole plot line there that if they took it out, and it would be a far leaner, it would be more Star Wars, if you know what I mean. The whole Finn and Rose thing absolutely did not work for me. I mean, he brought one new character to Star Wars, and that was Rose.
Yeah.
And
Admiral Holdo.
Oh yeah, Holdo. Yeah.
No,
anyway,
I mean, plot-wise, it's not great. That's a big issue for me. I think the plot's disappointing and remains so. But other aspects of the film, second time round, I could handle them better. I know. I watched it a second time and thought, okay, those bits, fair enough. But I still don't think it's particularly. It's not a fun romp.
No,
and isn't that what you want in a Star Wars movie, really?
Yeah. I mean,
I tell you what, it was much more exciting was seeing the trailer for Solo. I was like, oh, that looks like it might actually be a fun romp. But what do you think of the picture quality and the sound quality on?
Picture quality was superb, absolutely superb.
Yeah.
I watched it on the JVC. Obviously, it was shot on film, so it is grainy. People are not going to like the grain. There is quite a bit of grain there, especially on the island. The stuff that was shot on location in Ireland is
shot on location under difficult weather conditions.
Yeah, is rather grainy, but that's what you expect with that. In terms of black levels, I've seen a lot of people talking about elevated black levels, and I have to say I did not see that at all. I've watched it on 2 calibrated displays, and it looked the same as what I saw at the cinema, and I didn't think it was elevated. Now, this is one of the things when people discuss things on the forums, we don't know what picture settings they're using, we don't know what settings they're using for their HDR, and so on. There's no context there, so I'm not saying that those people are not experiencing that. It's just that I haven't using a properly calibrated display and so on. So it might be down to picture settings for those people. It may be the way that the player is sending HDR to their display or so on. That there could be other issues there. I don't know. It might be that, or they might just have the settings up too high, and that's what's elevating the blacks. But I didn't see any elevated blacks.
No, nor did I. I thought the picture looked fantastic. Like you say, shot on 35mm film, finished with a 4K DI, fantastic level of detail in some of the shots.
And the soundtrack it needs to be turned up slightly.
Turn up a little bit, yeah.
But it's a hell of a dynamic soundtrack. Yeah, really well done. And I thought it was really good. So, again, I don't know why my experiences at Loggerheads with other people that are commenting.
Yeah, but I've also been moaning about like the colours now. Well, it's a deliberately muted colour scheme apart from the bright reds on the white Salt Planet. Yeah. You know, it's not the most colourful film in the Star Wars universe.
And Snoke's,
and they've used the HDR. Sorry,
Snoke's throne room is red as well.
Yeah, that's that kind of red that I thought looked really good. But they've used HDR quite subtly. It's 1000 nit master, and it hasn't been overused. Dolby Vision, I think it looked fantastic. It looked exactly how I remember, you know, at least how I remember it looking from the cinema. I think it's a fair representation of the artistic intention. So if you don't like things like film grain or subtle use of HDR, well, that's what the director wanted to do. So tough.
Yeah, and it was shot on film. It's a big thing.
Some bits weren't. I noticed in the documentary they were shooting the bit in. I think it was in either when he was either the cave. In the cave or in Luke's hut. It was a very enclosed space and very dark, and they had to use digital cameras at that point. Yeah, because they couldn't use film cameras. But
this RE65 was used, and there's a couple
but
of
most of it's 35mm.
Most of it's film, and all the dailies were done on film as well, and it was that was interesting to see in the documentary. They were still doing it the old-fashioned way and sending the dailies off to get developed and so on. So, yeah, the one lesson that I have learned from that is do not pre-order on Amazon before the film comes out and you've seen it, and then forget about it and it just turns up on release day. Because I was actually heading out the door. I was going away for a couple of days, and thing comes in. What the hell is this? And opened it up, and what? So don't do that, people. If you don't want to waste £26 or however it was. Anyway, film's opening this Friday, Steve.
Yeah, this Friday, I was looking at thinking, there's not much opening this Friday. I thought, why is that? And I thought, I know why. Because the following week is Avengers Infinity War, and absolutely no one in the right mind is going to want to open up the week before that opens. So you're getting some pretty low-key releases this week. We've got Wildling, which is a story of a blossoming teenager who uncovers a dark secret behind a traumatic childhood, starring Liv Tyler and Brad Dourif, and Belle Poley, who is a rising young English actress who, Diary of a Teenage Girl, which she got really good reviews for. That's coming out. And also coming out this week is and I'm going to get this title right, the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, which is a film starring Lily James as a young journalist who goes to interview people about in the 40s after the German occupation in Guernsey, and hears their stories about their experiences during the German occupation, which actually sounds quite interesting, although it is a fairly unusual title.
You and I differ very strongly on what we might define to be interesting. But like this, I don't know if I'd trek off to go and see that on the big screen.
No, it probably won't happen that way. I'll go and see
Turn up and say, is this in IMAX?
Yeah, it's like I say, a couple of very low-key releases this week.
So either go and see Rampage or go and see Ready Player One before Avengers takes over every screen going. Discs released this week, so there's two of these reviews already up on the site and already on the homepage.
Yes, we've already got Ferdinand, which is up on the homepage. Animated feature for the kids from Blue Sky Studios, who also did things like Ice Age, about a bull, and also Suicide Squad: Hell to Pay, which is an animated Suicide Squad movie, so not directly related necessarily to the film that came out 2 years ago, the live action film, but using the same characters. So if you like your DC animated movies, there's that available, and also Arrow are doing a re-release special edition of Carrie, Brian De Palma's Carrie, which I love Carrie. I think it's a great film, and it's a really great package as you expect from Arrow, with lots of great features, documentaries, commentaries, etc. So worth checking out if you don't have that already.
If there's any classic catalogue title that goes through the hands of Arrow, go and buy it, because it will be. They will do their utmost best to make it look as stunning and as close to the director's intent as possible. So if you love your movies and you love your stuff like that, some of their releases, I mean, we give them best Blu-ray of the year for last year for their release of The Thing. Absolutely stunning. Right. Could they actually release any more discs that people would want to buy in May, Steve, on 4K Blu-ray?
They managed to squeeze one more in. Black Panther is arriving in the US, at least on the 15th of May. I expect to be around about that date as well for the UK. Obviously, Black Panther's been monumentally successful. It's just overtaken Titanic to be the third most successful film of all time in the US. It's also well on its way to be going, I think, the seventh or eighth most successful film ever worldwide. It's been an enormous hit. Although I noticed that the Fandango pre-sales for Infinity War are even bigger than the ones for Black Panther, so that could quickly overtake it, I think, possibly when it opens in a couple of weeks. But yeah, it's been a huge success both critically and commercially, and that's coming out on Ultra HD Blu-ray with Dolby Atmos and Dolby Vision on the 15th of May. So I'm quite looking forward to that.
Okay, you mentioned Solo. Sorry, Ed and Mark, we're going to talk a little bit more Star Wars, not for long though. Solo, Star Wars Story, the trailer came out, second full-length trailer. I have to say, I'm going to go and see this.
I'm going midnight screening, actually.
Are you really?
I'm shocked. Absolutely shocked.
Has it changed you that much that you're going to go to midnight?
It's like Battered Wives. Oh, he's going to be better this time. My black eyes have faded and it's going to be perfect.
No, he does love me, really. Yeah, no, I know it sounds stupid, but
it doesn't sound stupid. It is stupid.
It looked fun in the trailers, and I don't want much out of life. I just want something to be entertaining. My big problem with The Last Jedi was it wasn't very entertaining. This looked like it's going to be fun, and I'm still not totally convinced on the guy playing Han Solo, but sod it. Yeah, I'll go along and see it. Why not?
Yeah, I'll see it. I don't know if
it costs me any money.
Well, that's it. Limitless card. I don't know if I'm not going to do midnight show. No, absolutely not. But I'll go and see it so we can talk about it in the podcast at least and bore people stupid about it. So
yeah.
Well, I think it looks fun.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
I think at this stage I've gotten over characters I thought I knew being poorly treated. So it's a case of I don't know, in a weird
not helping the Battered Wives metaphor.
No. But in a weird way, The Last Jedi has kind of acclimatized me for what I should expect. It's set that bar, just at the level where I expect it to be Marvel meets Star Wars now. And even like Woody Harrelson in the trailer kind of gave me Michael Rooker from Guardians of the Galaxy kind of vibes. And it just seems like, if anything, Solo's the character most suited to that approach of the kind of Marvel type. Bit of jokey, a few quips, some good kind of popcorn munching battle sequences, and that's it. It doesn't have to be any more than that. And he's certainly more than someone like Luke. He's the character most suited to that.
Yeah, I think you're right there, Mark. And like I said last week, I'm at peace now. I'm one with the Force. I know they don't want me as a fan. I'll dip in and out when I please now, and I'm not going to get worked up in any way about it. It's not worth it. It's just, I've got my original films, the original trilogy. I can always go back to them. I've got my memories. Whatever they want to do now, fine by me. I'll dip in and out like I do with Marvel. I dip in and out now and again if it's something that I quite fancy seeing or whatever. But yeah.
I will say one thing, although I'm not convinced about Alden Ehrenreich being Han Solo, I thought Donald Glover definitely looks the part as
doesn't he?
Anything that Donald Glover does basically turns to gold.
Yeah,
he is an absurdly talented human being. So that bit is not a concern. It must be said.
Good stuff. And if anybody's interested, I'm just about to go and proof the review as well, but Netflix, the big series that's launching this weekend as we record on a Friday is Lost in Space.
Looking forward to this.
Goes live today. Kazi's just done his review. He's just sent me an email to say the review's ready to go, so I'll quickly proof that in a minute and it'll be on the homepage. But looking forward to this because I've got to say the if there's anything Netflix does really well is throw lots of money at good TV series. And I expect this one to be
killing me at the moment. They're killing me. They're doing so much good stuff. It's just driving me up the wall. Like, I haven't got time for all this.
First world problems there.
Well, I mean, this is the big thing at the minute. Is TV really going to take over from movies? And I think there's definitely a market there for your 10-hour, 10 episodes, like Stranger Things. That type of thing. What was the other one that I watched recently? Westworld, where it was, manageable 10 hours, really good, everything compacted into one season, leaves it open for continuation at the end, whether it's the same thing or not. So yeah, I think there's a big future in stuff like that, but also with the films that are landing on Netflix. Some of them haven't been great, but then some of them, like Annihilation, have been really, really good and probably should have deserved a big screen run at some point anyway. But Interesting that Stranger Things hit the headlines this week, Steve, and the reason for that was?
Yeah, unbelievably, plagiarism, which I rather thought was the premise of the entire show. Yeah, to be fair, this is a specific writer who claims he pitched something to the Duffer Brothers, who are the guys that created Stranger Things, and he says that Stranger Things has ripped off his plot. Now, I don't know how you can say that, because let's be honest, Stranger Things already rips off It, Poltergeist, and Firestarter pretty heavily. Just to be, that's off the top of my head. I mean, there are way more influences than just that, but those three are quite obvious. So all I can say is if they did rip off this guy's story, it wasn't a very original story to start with. And yeah, it just seems crazy to think that a show whose entire raison d'etre is basically to homage, and I use that term loosely, certain things from the 80s, could accuse it of plagiarism. I mean,
if anything, I think Stephen King's got a bigger saying that than anything else, to be honest, and Spielberg.
Yeah. Having seen it at the cinema last year, I'd forgotten just how much Stranger Things rips off It. Just massively. The whole teenage gang, all that stuff is straight out of It. And obviously the poltergeist elements are pretty strong. And then things like Firestarter are big issues. Yeah, so Stephen King, of anyone, should be the one suing them. But I just find that really amusing that someone could even accuse Stranger Things of plagiarism when that's the kind of point of it.
Yeah. And the other big news story, and this is interesting, I suppose, to a certain extent. However, I think myself and Mark might not be quite as interested in this, but Lord of the Rings TV series, Amazon are reported to be spending upwards of $1 billion to bring this to the screen. Now, they've got to start... Is it within 2 years they've got to start production on this?
So they paid $250 million just for the TV rights. And they have to start. They have to get something done. Start the first season at least within 2 years. So they've got to get a move on. But they're budgeting 5 seasons with a total cost of $1 billion. I don't know if that $1 billion also includes the $250 million they've already spent. I hope so. But $1 billion for 5 seasons of television is a staggering amount of money.
What it does show is the desperation of the likes of Amazon and to a certain extent Netflix to find the next Game of Thrones.
Yes, that's what everyone is desperately trying to create. I mean, I think HBO have come close with Westworld. They've got their sort of replacement, if you like, but they're also talking about doing numerous Game of Thrones spin-offs. So what's really interesting about this deal is that, yes, it's for a TV series, but it's been done with Warner's and New Line. And there is apparently an option to use footage from the films, Lord of the Rings films, in the TV series. So the question then arises, will they... I mean, obviously the question is, they've already done Lord of the Rings, the books, essentially, in the films. So this is going to presumably fill in gaps and work around it. So... that's interesting in a sense. It's not essentially the story of the books themselves, but rather the appendices and the stuff that happens around them, which they delved into in the films in small ways. But this would obviously be the whole point of this series. Whether they'll use the same cast, would they bring back, say, Ian McKellen as Gandalf? Interesting. It's just, I just think everyone was a bit sick of The Hobbit, weren't they? Does anyone really want?
Yeah, this is what I was thinking. The first trilogy, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, went down really well. But The Hobbit, really, in those terms, it fell flat on its face, really. There wasn't the hype around and people weren't as interested. They'd seen that done in Lord of the Rings, so I think that was the problem. There wasn't anything new in The Hobbit that they hadn't seen with Lord of the Rings and how it was brought to the screen. So, to me, I'm like, meh, I have no interest in this. Waste your $1 billion, because they really have to change the whole feel of it, but that doesn't sound like it's going to happen if they're going to use footage from the existing.
Also the big question is, will Peter Jackson be involved at all?
Yeah.
There's no reason why he can't, and he hasn't said he isn't going to be. So, I just think. I mean, I'll watch it because I've got Amazon anyway.
If you are a risk-averse organisation, and to an extent, all of these organisations are. And you were trying to import a ready-made universe that you felt had some mileage to it. I mean, what stood out about Game of Thrones is that Game of Thrones was a very clever balance when it started, because enough people had read the books to go, ooh, this probably ought to be quite good. But then equally, it wasn't so well known that there were enormous numbers of preconceived ideas about what it should be. Whereas The Lord of the Rings, as you say, one, it's already been largely covered, and two, there's fatigue about it. So I'm just trying to think where else in terms of either literature or film you could go to pick something which would give you 5 seasons of high octane acty brilliance, and I'm not 100% sure that there is much.
The other thing with Game of Thrones, and a lot of series have caught up with that, was the whole risky, sexy angle, violence. It was really adult in tone, and Westworld as well very, very much went that way. But I can't see that being applied to Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. I don't want to see Gandalf nude. I'll just say that right now.
Hobbit sex is also probably.
But you know what I mean? I mean, the thing that hooked people into Game of Thrones as well was the fact that it was violent. It was adult very adult in nature. I remember Steve first talking about it, and that was the things that drew you in. Plus, it was shot in a really cinematic way, which hadn't been done before for TV as well, or hadn't to that extent been done for TV before. So, it's kind of difficult to see. Unless they break new ground and they come in with new technology or whatever to hook people in, I don't see what the hook is.
No, and also the first season of Game of Thrones, as Ed's just said, it was pitched very well, and also they kept the. I mean, it was it looked good. It looked very cinematic, but it was there wasn't any massive battle scenes in that.
No,
first
it was
season.
all after the battle.
They literally knocked Tyrion out, and he woke up after the battle had finished to avoid any big expensive battles and that sort of thing. So they were quite canny in terms of budgeting that first season. Since then, of course, things have gone completely the other way, and now the budgets have increased, and obviously they've got huge battle scenes and everything. But with Lord of the Rings, there's an expectation, isn't there? You're going into thinking, well, I better see a big battle scene then, because that's what we had in the film. So if they try and do something low key, because even you think $1 billion, that's a lot of dough. $250 million for 10 hours of TV isn't 250 million is how much the normal tentpole movie costs these days. So it's not as much money as it sounds like spread across 5 seasons. So it'd be interesting to see how they spend that money and how good it looks on screen, and what kind of aspect ratio they go for in terms of the picture itself, because a lot of TV series are using scope ratio now. That's becoming quite common. So yeah, I mean, we'll see, but I think it's a hell of a gamble.
I think the hook is it's Lord of the Rings, and whilst we might be somewhat disillusioned with the amount that Peter Jackson got out of that franchise, ultimately there are people out there who want to see more.
Apparently,
it's throwing money and hope for a franchise that can be milked like Star Wars. And at one point we were balking at the money that Disney paid for that, and that looks like a slam dunk.
That was a really smart investment by Disney.
In retrospect, yeah. And when it comes to Amazon, you're thinking that the streaming services don't have quite the same link between costs and return as cinema does. So it's all seen as adding value. There's that kind of idea of creating almost like a critical mass of content. So, no one will be told if there's, a low number of new sign-ups or viewing figures are low for it to begin with. They can take those risks. And I think there probably is an appetite to see something slightly more low-key that you can explore with the Lord of the Rings characters themselves, and it's a franchise that people know. It's something that you can kind of put front and center and say this is exclusive to Amazon. So I don't think that $1 billion sounds actually that much when you consider what they can get out of it.
Amazon are desperate for a big hit, because although they started quite well and there was quite a bit of investment in there, when I come and think of TV series that must be seen, it's either on Sky Atlantic, Now TV, or it's on Netflix.
Yeah,
it's not on Amazon.
There's nothing on Amazon that I think if I lost say Amazon, I don't know, increased the cost of the streaming service, or it wasn't part of the Prime package I get anyway, I would probably not bother renewing it. Whereas I'd definitely keep Now and Netflix.
The only thing I've watched on Amazon really is the Grand Tour, and rumor is that's going to get cancelled. So
certainly curtailed. It would appear there's going to be some more, but maybe not as many as were planned, and maybe on a more constrained budget.
Yeah,
admittedly, that's an interesting one, because there is an element that, given what appeared to be all the money in the world, the Grand Tour producers made something which was visually spectacular, but it didn't necessarily have any of the intrinsically British joy that some episodes of Top Gear shot on a budget of £11.50 achieved.
Yeah.
So, I mean, within all of this, obviously special effects are special effects, and if you want to have an army of people stage a mock battle, that's not cheap. But there is this sort of cycle now that marquee television programs have to be extremely expensive, and I don't think that's a healthy or good. Essentially, it is possible to make brilliantly compelling television that is not does not require an army of special effects animators or people having a war.
I think we're about to see this, Ed. I think we're going to see a reset coming very soon, if it's not already started, because Netflix have been throwing money at stuff, but I think you're going to see more and more series on Netflix start to come to either a natural end a bit earlier than maybe people expected, or they will start cutting things. They will start cancelling series, because
they've cancelled quite a lot already, actually.
Yeah,
because it hasn't been doing the business.
I think we'll see more and more of that as we go on, and the same with Amazon. I mean, Top Gear, the Grand Tour was supposed to be a big tentpole thing for them, and it obviously just hasn't worked. Because, like you see, apart from the opening episode of season 1, which was absolutely spectacular, not because it used 3 Mustangs, it was just the way it was done. It was absolutely spectacularly done. They'd spent a lot of money on it, and the opening was fantastic, and it's what you but then it really dropped off after that, in terms of that spectacular, you must watch type of thing, and it became, well, it didn't know what it wanted to be, and I think that's been the issue with it. I think they've had too much money and too much choice, and maybe they'd be a bit more creative on a reduced budget, and I think a lot of TV series is probably suffering from the fact that they're having money pumped into them, and maybe the creative thing is to try and be creative with the budget and creative with how you're doing shots, and trying to do more in camera than relying on spending money on CG and so on. And I think one of the series that does that, and certainly it's going to change going into season 2 with everything that I'm reading, is Star Trek Discovery. It started off with probably not a big enough budget, Steve, because the first sort of special effects scenes that we saw at some conventions and so on being leaked to the press they weren't very good.
No, it was terrible.
And they obviously took some time to then invest the right amount of money in it, but it wasn't a huge amount of money. It wasn't tens of millions of dollars. It was enough to make it creative enough. The special effects were good enough to hold it up. But I think even with season 2, I think you'll see things changing with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with Mark. There's a danger. At the end of the day, nothing is better than quality writing, particularly in TV, where you have to do something over a long, 10 episodes or a number of seasons. You need quality writing, and that's what keeps a show good. And as an example, as much as I love Westworld, and it is a really good series, and it's got serious production values. If you've ever seen Channel 4's series Humans, that addresses many of the same issues on a much smaller budget, but it's very well written, and therefore you can get around budget restrictions if you've got good writing. And I think nothing beats quality writing. So as long as the writing remains good, and that's one of the things I think that Netflix has done very well. They've chucked money at their shows, but they've also had some bloody good writers on some of their shows. If you watch something like Mindhunter, or some of the Marvel shows that they've done, or indeed Altered Carbon, they had quality writing in there, along with all the production values and the money that was being chucked at it. So as long as the writing remains good, you have good shows. What you don't want is end up like movies where the writing seems to cost £10, $10.50, and they've spent $200 million on effects, and you end up with an awful film. I think what's good about TV these days is that you're getting cinema quality images, but adult, intelligent writing with it. Yes, you could say that Game of Thrones and Westworld have naughty scenes in them and lots of violence, which they do, but that's stuff you just don't get at the cinema anymore, because every film has to be a PG-13, and therefore you can't do anything offensive, you can't have anything rude, you can't swear, you can't have extreme violence, whereas in TV you can, and that's the niche it's filling, and as long as it continues to do that in a creative way, I'm happy. But what I don't want is it to go down the road of the movies where they just chuck an infinite amount of money at something and you end up with a lot of rubbish.
I want to see Blade Runner on the small screen. I've now watched those.
Well, watch Altered Carbon. That basically is. That's what it is.
Okay, I haven't seen Altered Carbon yet, but yeah, I watched it again. Obviously, it's become my go-to test disc at the minute as well for a lot of things. But I've watched the film a number of times now, and I've also watched the films that are in between the anime and the other things that they shot to sort of gap the 30 years between the two films. And I just want more of that universe. It's fascinating to me, absolutely fascinating. And I think it would make a nice slow burner over 10 episodes or whatever a season.
Yeah, pictures in Netflix. But yeah, you should definitely check out Altered Carbon because that has got a very Blade Runner vibe to it.
Okay, I will do. It's a shame this XF90's not got Dolby Vision. I could have watched it on that.
Yeah, quite.
The only thing that will make me disillusioned with television is if it disappears up its own backside like Lost again. That's the only thing that's the thing that keeps me coming back to decent streaming services, is because if viewing figures drop radically, you know that, like with Netflix, they'll likely give you a final season almost like a token to the fans to say, look, we'll wrap it up. You know, it may not have the budget of the previous ones, but we'll wrap it up for you and we'll give you an ending, rather than just coming away saying, well, was that it? You know, I don't understand what's happened, you know, or just suddenly cancelling it, like kind of all the Fox shows and that kind of thing. You know, as long as I get some kind of a conclusion, then I'm absolutely fine.
And on that note, it's time to cancel the AVForums podcast for this week. And my thanks to Steve Withers,
Steve or Dollface,
Ed Selley,
Pudding,
and Mark Botwright.
I want you to go clear my browser history.
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, bookmark AVForums for latest reviews, news and videos, and of course leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes, but only if you enjoyed the show. I'm Phil Hinton, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.